My name is Corporal Rodriguez. I will be presenting developing resiliency at the squad level. The purpose for this is so I can teach you how you can help develop resiliency with your soldiers and yourself at the squad level, and why it is important to do so. It's a topic that I personally believe is very important, considering that in the past year I have had 3 to 4 soldiers underneath me, 3 or 4 different soldiers underneath me, and underneath my care and supervision, and I have helped each and every one of them develop resiliency in some way, shape, or form. And it also helped them develop themselves as soldiers and will no doubt affect their Army career down the road. For the agenda, we will be going over the introduction. Afterwards, we will go into morale and resiliency. After which, we will talk about why resiliency is important for both the soldiers and the NCO. Afterwards, we'll go into field and resiliency and how the field environment affects resiliency both positively and negatively. We'll go into how to develop resiliency, followed by a nice conclusion to wrap up all the prior topics, and I'll be taking any questions at the end as well. So, introduction. Developing resiliency is an important way to keep soldiers motivated and to keep them from feeling stagnant. If you have soldiers or a squad with poor resiliency, they're going to feel stagnant, and they are going to affect unit readiness negatively. So the more resilient your soldier and your squad is, the more likely that your unit will be ready as a whole, since squads are the lowest breakdown of chain of command. So your squad leader, NCO, should be developing resiliency with your soldiers in order to keep your unit readiness up, so the unit will be able to conduct field operations or deployment operations overseas. NCOs are important to keeping resiliency high, both on the squad level and any other level of leadership. However, I'll only be going over the squad level. And the use of squads and soldiers to build resiliency amongst themselves is important in giving soldiers a way to speak with each other and to figure out problems. It is also important at the squad level because it is an easier way for soldiers to get that one-on-one assistance that they need. Morale and resiliency. So, morale and resiliency are both two intertwined topics. In my opinion, they both affect each other in a multitude of ways. They are very interlocked. Morale can be negatively or positively affected by how resilient a squad is, and the resiliency of a squad can also be affected by how high or low the morale of said squad is. So, for example, if you have a squad with low morale, or with soldiers with low morale in that squad, the likelihood of the resiliency of the squad average is going to be much lower, as opposed to a squad with high morale. Morale is a gauge that an NCO can use to see how the squad is being affected by different hardships or stressors caused by the Army. Well, not the Army per se, but more so the op tempo and the high field environments that the Army can provide. And it's just the way that it happens to work out. Without a strong base, like a strong squad leader or a strong NCO, soldiers' morale can fall quickly, which is the responsibility of the NCO to keep the morale up. So now we're getting into why resiliency is important. Resiliency is important because it affects unit readiness both positively and negatively. If you have soldiers that aren't resilient, they're more likely to sham out of work. They're more likely to take their responsibilities lightly. They will not be putting 110% of their effort, and they will more likely they'll be more likely to get in trouble because without resiliency, they will be making poor decisions, and it will affect their PT in all aspects of their military career. Resiliency affects every aspect of a soldier's life, both on and off work. Uh, Soldiers that have low resiliency are more likely to go home and not interact with their coworkers or their friends. They're more likely just to sit in their room and play video games, or drink by themselves, or choose to do choose poor actions that will result in them getting Article 15s or a lack of discipline. Without a resilient squad, missions will start to fail and will be negatively affected by the lack of resiliency. So many times most times NCOs and squad leaders don't really see the importance of resiliency. At least what I've noticed in my Army career so far. A lot of NCOs that I've worked with have given into a lack of resiliency, as well as falling into the habit of complaining and dropping morale for their soldiers. Without a strong base, your soldiers aren't going to be likely to be resilient and to work constantly and work hard for you. They are more likely to sham out and to make poor decisions, as stated multiple times. A lot of this video is going to be reiteration, since resiliency is so important, and there are only so many aspects of resiliency that affect it in huge margins. Soldiers work together more effectively with high levels of resiliency. That's due to a high level of morale. So soldiers will go out of their way to help each other, and they will go out of their way to accomplish missions. Soldiers will also put more time and effort into conducting online training, or into conducting field training, or into working in the field. Which brings me into my next topic, which is the field and resiliency. So field operations can positively or negatively affect resiliency. So for myself as a medic, whenever we go to the field and we have a lot of operations going on at high op tempo, our resiliency tends to fall, since we have such a high op tempo. So most of the missions we run starts to slowly chip away at our resiliency, and we start to break down. We start to get complacent, and complacency causes a lot of issues in a field environment, because that is one of the highest likelihood environments for a soldier to be injured in. NCOs are important to building resiliency in the field, because NCOs are there to train their soldiers. So if you're constantly training your soldiers and you're preparing them for missions and for the high likelihood of the fall of resiliency in a work field environment, and you're constantly on top of your soldiers and making sure that they are not getting complacent or they aren't getting injured, it is more likely that you will have greater success in the field. Negative effects in the field include failing missions. So if you fail a mission, depending on what went wrong with the mission, soldiers are more likely to beat up on themselves or to make fun of each other, bringing down unit cohesion. And if unit cohesion is a big part of building resiliency. Your soldiers are going to be more lazy if they are feeling less resilient than they should be. Soldiers are really good at figuring out how they're doing as a whole. So if they feel like they're doing really bad, they're not going to try as hard, and they're not going to be able to help you out in the field environment. That will also lead into a lack of motivation if you don't have any resiliency. Your soldiers are going to less likely to put forth all their effort. That is just a direct result of a lack of resiliency and morale. Positive effects in the field include successful missions. So if you have a high resiliency level and your soldiers are used to the high op tempo, they are more likely to be successful in a mission in a field environment. Can you go back, please? It brings a greater willingness to work. So your soldiers' work ethic will be much higher with a high resiliency. It will also bring the morale up, and soldiers will be more than likely to get out of the way. I know the best in the field for me and my soldiers, Whenever we know we're about to get home, that's when we get a spike in resiliency and motivation. That's when soldiers are busting their butts to work, and they are really putting forth the effort to get home in a timely fashion. Unfortunately, it is difficult to maintain that, but it is the responsibility of the NCO to help maintain that level of resiliency and morale with their soldiers. Another effect of resiliency that is positive is positive outcomes of training. So your soldiers are taking away more from training. They are learning, and they are putting forth the effort to learn and to embroil themselves in their job and to bring about changes and become great leaders. So ways to develop resiliency. So developing resiliency mainly falls on the NCO as well as individual soldiers. NCOs conducting AARs with the soldiers is really good in developing resiliency. I know anytime I was conducting an AAR with my squad leaders in the past, I always felt like my opinion mattered. I always felt like I was important, and I felt like it was a great opportunity for me to put forth ideas that I would not have had prior to, or I wouldn't have had the confidence to put forth. NCOs working with soldiers, so a lot of times what I've seen in the past is NCOs standing around with their hands in their pockets, or they will sit around and eat food or drink or go do online classes in their offices instead of assisting their soldiers with daily tasks, which can be a drag on soldiers. And it's detracting from your soldiers' readiness because they aren't being trained to a level or a standard that is expected of the United States Army. I know oftentimes when I was a private or a specialist working under a sergeant or a corporal that wouldn't work, oftentimes I found it quite frustrating that I was doing all the manual labor, and they would sit there and watch. I know I found it frustrating, so I try not to do that to my soldiers, and I believe it greatly impacts resiliency in the Army. NCOs placing soldiers' needs above their own is a tricky subject because if you're supposed to place your soldiers' needs above your own. However, oftentimes that will detract from your resiliency. It's a slippery slope, so you got to balance it. If you don't assist your soldiers, then they will feel like you aren't caring for them, and if you give too much time to your soldiers, then you will be feeling like you aren't taking care of yourself. So it's a fine balance, but regardless, the needs of your soldiers should always be above your own. Just remember to take care of your own, because that will also drop resiliency in the squad. If your NCO isn't a strong leader, getting back to that strong base 2 slides ago, if your NCO isn't a squad leader, the likelihood of your squad being resilient is very low. NCOs assisting soldiers in personal and professional issues is a good way to develop resiliency. So if your soldier is having an issue at work or an issue within personal life, you should be there to assist them and to talk with them through it in order to develop them as people and NCOs future NCOs. Soldiers oftentimes feel as though their NCOs don't care for them, which is definitely not good for resiliency. In conclusion, the importance of resiliency is paramount in a squad, especially at the squad level, because that is where you have the most interaction from NCO to soldier. Oftentimes, actually always, the way that a platoon level or a company level breaks down is you have one NCO in charge of a platoon, and 3 NCOs in charge of teams, and then NCOs in charge of squads. And at the squad level, they are more intimately able to interact with their soldiers' issues and get them to understand or see why they're doing certain things for work or what the issues at work are. Resiliency is essential in working on personal development. Without high resiliency, you are less likely to put forth the effort into making yourself a better person. If you are constantly at low morale, low resiliency levels in your squad, your soldiers aren't going to be conducting training or want to conduct training. Without a resilient squad, soldiers won't be able to work to their full capacity. Soldiers are going to be more lethargic. They won't want to work, and they will feel less inclined to put forth their effort. I have no more time for questions. I'm sorry. That concludes my video or my presentation on developing resiliency at the squad level. I appreciate your time and thank you for being here.